again, Franzi, and today I'm doing a podcast recommendation video because last year I really was into audiobooks and I listened to a lot of audiobooks, but then somehow I finally got into the podcast mania, and now whatever I do, I listen to podcasts at the same time. And when I find something interesting, like a new TV show or whatever, then the first thing I do is look for podcasts discussing this show or that event. And I don't know, it feels really good to listen to them. It's like I'm so much more into TV shows than into movies. So I feel like podcasts are my audiobooks in a way, which makes absolutely no sense, but okay. First, I want to recommend you an app, and this is Pocket Cast. Or let me see if it's Pocket Cast or Pocket Casts. Yeah, Pocket Casts. So I really don't like listening to podcasts via iTunes. I don't know, maybe if you have an iPhone, it's a bit different and easier to do. But I'm not a huge fan of iTunes anymore. I mean, for my music library, it's okay, but not for anything else. Pocket Casts lets you save all your podcasts and lets you make playlists and sleep timers and just everything you could do with podcasts. It lets you do it, and it's just so easy to use. It has a really nice user interface, and I think it's free, or at least it's only like $2-3 or something, but it's so worth it, and it's a great app. Check it out. Okay, let's start. I have several categories, and the first thing is like marketing and business related. So I work as a photographer, and there's just a lot of marketing things you have to think of, and if you work for yourself, there's always so much to learn and you have to do everything yourself. So I really enjoy listening to marketing podcasts and like business and work related podcasts in general, because it's just super motivating to me and it inspires me, and I really like to start the day with a podcast that is kind of in a way related to my work, and then like take some steps that were mentioned there and transform it for myself. So that makes me really happy, and I really love to listen to them. I think my favorite business-oriented podcast is the Smart Passive Income podcast, and it's mostly about passive income, so doing work that brings you money in the long run, but it's just so much more. It's a really great podcast, really well done, really greatly curated. Can you say that? So Pat Flynn is the host of this podcast, and I feel like in comparison to other business related podcasts, there's just the most I can take from it. It's not only recycled stuff you hear all the time, it's really great new information, and yeah, I think it's just my favorite. So check it out. Another one in this category I really like is Build Your Tribe with Jolene Johnson. And Jolene Johnson is one of those Beachbody coaches, can you say that? She did the Turbo Fire DVDs, and I really thought she's only doing like sports and stuff, but she has this, it's more like a marketing related podcast, and I thought, wait, that's super weird, but then I listened to some of it and I really like it. It's just super relatable, and I think she's really nice to listen to, and it just seems really kind of intimate, friendly advice, and I don't know, I really like it. Another podcast in this category is Entrepreneur on Fire, and this is a daily podcast with entrepreneurs from all kinds of areas, and this is great if you listen to a lot of podcasts and you want to listen to something daily. And the last one in this category is Homework, and this is hosted by two men, I think. It's a podcast about people who work from home, so freelancer and everything, like about routines and habits and just distractions and like everything you have to do with if you work at home and you try to build something from your home, and motivation and inspiration, and another great podcast. Then we have creativity, and I have a few of them, but I only give you one today, and it's the Unmistakable Creative. It's also kind of business related sometimes, but it's just mostly like artists and people who wrote books and like all kind of interesting personalities who come onto the podcast and just talk, and very diverse topics as well, and just a fun podcast. Then we have a travel podcast, and if you're into traveling, backpacking, just more like living a nomadic life in a way, and just like traveling in not so touristy places or traveling on the cheap, then this might be for you. And it is the Zero to Travel podcast, hosted by Jason Moore. Really interesting topics if you want to travel alone, and just travel hacks, and you really want to travel after you listen to it. Then the next part I called serial podcasts. So podcasts that have seasons like TV shows. The first one is Serial by Sarah Koenig. It's a crime podcast, and it's just really addicting and like a TV show in a way. The case in itself is kind of boring, I feel, and there's really not so much that's happening, but this podcast is just really, really addicting, and she really made something great out of this case. Definitely looking forward to the second season. And the other serial podcast, Startup by Alex Bloomberg, someone who wants to start a podcasting business. And it's just so interesting, and I really like those business-related podcasts, as I said in the beginning. So this is just really great to see the struggle of someone who like is new in the business in a way, and just has to learn everything from scratch, and you're just there, and the production is so great. Interview snippets and sounds, and you just feel like you're there. It's really greatly done. Okay, then I have an all-round podcast category, and this is This American Life by Ira Glass. This was actually the first one I listened to because it was recommended to me all the time. And I think it's one of the most famous podcasts, probably. It's a weekly podcast to a special like topic, but there are mostly like 4 or 5 different stories that fit that topic description. And just every topic, I mean, even if it sounds like it's super lame, boring, it's just so interesting. So there's so much like interview snippets and sound snippets, and you just really feel like you are there in this moment. Then I have the category People and Relationships. And the one I really like is Death, Sex and Money. And it's a podcast that has just so many themes of, death, sex and money. So all the things people don't like to talk about. Even if it's just like having not enough money to live, or I don't know. That's just really interesting topics, and every podcast centers around one person mostly, and then just their storyline. And the second one is Sex Out Loud by Tristan Taormino. For those like relationship, sex-oriented podcasts, there are a lot out there. And I think the most famous is the Savage Lovecast by Dan Savage, which I don't find that interesting. But I really like Sex Out Loud. Lots of different topics, and the host is really nice to listen to, and it's just not as boring. She always has guests, and great show. And the last category is TV show oriented. It doesn't have to be TV shows. Like, even if you have a book series or anything, there's probably a podcast to it, and you should look for them because they can be really amazing. So at the moment, I have 3 I want to talk to you. The first one is the Gilmore Guys podcast. So in March, I watched Gilmore Girls for the first time, and I was so into it that I started watching it all over again as soon as I was finished after 21 days. And now I watch an episode of Gilmore Girls, and then I watch the pairing episode of the podcast. And this podcast is made by 2 guys, and one is a long-time Gilmore Girls fan, and the other one watches the show for the first time, and it's just really hilarious. Like, there are some episodes that are so much off topic that it gets annoying, but mostly they are really great, and they just analyze everything about the show, from the fashion to the pop culture references, and it's just super fun to listen to, and to have someone who likes Gilmore Girls as much. The other one I discovered last week, and really liked. I just finished the 3rd season of House of Cards, so I'm a bit late for this podcast, but I definitely want to listen to it again. And it's a podcast that's about the 3rd season of House of Cards, and it seems to be really kind of official. I don't know, it's made by Brooke Gladstone, and it's called On House of Cards. What's really great about it is that they also record sound snippets from the episode, and then they talk about it to people who work on House of Cards. So the episode I watched, the producer or the writer was there, and they talked about like the characters and how he wrote them, and just a lot of behind the scenes stuff, which is really, really interesting. So I definitely want to listen to all of those episodes again. And the 3rd one I'm going to recommend because I just started it, is a West Wing podcast. So I just started watching the West Wing because everyone raves about it all the time, and people compare it from the dialogue to Gilmore Girls because it's so fast and sarcastic, and I don't know, probably just great dialogue. And it's a little bit hard getting into it because I don't know if you ever watched The West Wing, but the pilot alone, it seems so dated. The whole cinematography and everything is just brown and beige, and it just looks so old and not very interesting. So I needed like friends to watch this with me, and so I listened to this podcast. It's by 2 young women, and the only problem is that they are longtime fans, or at least they already watched the whole show, so they don't spoil it, but when they talk about things, I really don't know what they're talking about because I don't know the characters that much. I feel like with the Gilmore Guys podcast, it's a little bit better because one of them is seeing the show for the first time as well. And so there are maybe different things to think about. Like, I don't know. Doesn't matter. The West Wing podcast is called Winging It. And yes, check it out. If you have podcast recommendations for me, I follow a lot of them, but I still take recommendations, and there are so many great ones out there. So I hope this video isn't too long already. I really wanted to only tell you the names of the podcasts, but now I talked so much again. Yes, but this was a really fun video to make, and I hope you like it and get a bit more into podcasts because they are awesome. So thank you very much for watching, and I see you soon. Bye bye.